Hey everyone. So this week I would like to start a new feature for Elizabeth Stable that I've been excited about for the last probably couple of months, even before everything with Mitty happened. So I'd like to start, Lord willing, every week to film our time with Pilot, either with me or with my husband Mauricio or with our boys all together, or whatever the Lord would have. But my goal is that we will be using the things that I'm experiencing with Pilot, with horses, and point it to the Lord in a way that is encouraging and uplifting and just pointing us to the Lord in something so beautiful like the horse. I find that horses have been my passion since I was so little, and the Lord has just always used them to point me to Him in the most beautiful ways. And I'd love to share that with you, whether you're a horse person or not. God has placed these animals in our lives for such an amazing purpose, to glorify Him and for us to see Him too. And so one of the things that hit me just the last probably couple of weeks, an example of what I'd like to kind of do is basically there's this woman at my barn, and she knows a ton about horses. She's just trained them and been around them for her whole life, and she owns, I think, maybe 4 or 5 of them, and just a very gifted woman. And she was out in the pasture. We were kind of watching the horses together, and a couple of them were misbehaving, and they were hers. And she kind of yelled at them a little and was just, kind of saying, hey, stop messing around, and there was another woman with us, and she said, well, you could just call them by their names and separate them, by hand. And the woman looked at her and she said, well, I could, but they're my horses, and they know my voice, and they know when I'm telling them to do something, and they'll respond because they know me. And I just thought about that for a minute, because I think that oftentimes in our lives, we know His voice if we belong to Christ, and at least, Lord willing, we do. And if we hear His voice, as it says, I think it's in one of the epistles of Paul, it says, if you hear His voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. Today, if you hear His voice. And I know that a lot of times I hear His voice, and I know that I hear His voice. But just like those horses, I don't do anything about it. And I will kind of still mess around and do my old things and kind of stay in the old ruts that I know are wrong, even though I hear His voice. And I hear His voice telling me, hey, listen up. And I know His voice, and so I pray that even though it's easy to fall into that sinful pattern, I would be able to listen and say, I do hear you. And I pray that that you would as well, along with me, that we would truly listen to the call of our shepherd, of His voice, and that no matter what it is, no matter what it could be in your life, that He's calling you to, or that He's calling you not to do, or whatever, that you would just stop and listen and know that you hear His voice, and you know His voice if you belong to Him. And if you don't belong to Jesus yet, but you have heard of Him, and every time you hear His name, you want to know more, He's calling, and it's His voice. And I'm praying that you wouldn't harden your heart, and that you wouldn't keep messing around, but that you would turn and look Him right in the eye and walk over, just like the horses did the other night, and place your head in His arms and say, hey, Lord, you are mine, and I hear your voice, and I obey you. So that's my new goal for Elizabeth Stable. I will be filming more with my horse now. I'm actually at my parents' cabin, so I'm not with Pilot right now, but next week, Lord willing, I will be starting that with him, with my family, or just with me. So that's kind of the new thing, and excited to embark on that. So